You know that feeling when you're lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, and your mind starts doing that thing where it catastrophizes every possible financial disaster that could hit you tomorrow. The water heater dies, the transmission blows, you get a letter from your landlord, or worse, you get a call from HR on a Tuesday afternoon with that specific calendar invite that has no title. Sound familiar? Now what if I told you there's a specific dollar amount that doesn't just quiet those thoughts, it practically silences them for good? Most people think $100,000 is something only Wall Street guys or tech bros in San Francisco ever see in their personal savings account. But here's the thing, there's real psychology and real math behind why this number creates a shift so dramatic that people describe it like waking up in a different life entirely. And today, we're going to break down exactly what happens, mentally, financially, and practically, when your savings account finally crosses 6 figures. My name is Cash, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, human psychology, and why some people seem to float through financial chaos, while others are constantly one bad week away from complete disaster. If you're someone who's serious about building real lasting wealth, not lottery ticket wealth, not social media influencer wealth, but the kind that actually holds up under pressure when life decides to test you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps put things in perspective for you. Now before we talk about what $100,000 actually does to your life, let's be honest about what life looks like without it. And I'm not just talking about being flat broke. I'm talking about that uncomfortable middle ground, the place where you make decent money, you pay your bills on time, you're not behind on anything, you've got a Netflix subscription and a gym membership you use twice a month, but you also have absolutely nothing saved. You're technically fine, until you're not. Think about the last time an unexpected expense showed up uninvited. Maybe it was $800 for a car repair. Maybe it was a $1,400 medical bill your insurance decided not to fully cover because of a technicality buried in page 47 of your plan documents. Or maybe your company had a restructuring, that's the corporate word for layoffs, and suddenly that paycheck you were counting on was gone. If you had nothing saved, that moment wasn't just stressful, it was paralyzing. Every option felt bad. Credit card, payment plan, calling family and trying to make it sound casual, selling something on Facebook Marketplace at midnight. This is what financial experts call the vulnerability trap. You're not irresponsible, you're not lazy, you're just one inconvenience away from a full-on crisis. And the exhausting part, you stay in that trap not because you don't work hard, but because nobody ever showed you what getting out actually looks like, or what it feels like on the other side. Here's where it gets really interesting. Most conversations about savings milestones start at $1,000, your starter emergency fund, then $10,000, your real emergency buffer that covers most disasters, and both of those matter enormously. But $100,000 is a different category entirely. Think about it this way. A $1,000 emergency fund covers a car repair. A $10,000 fund covers a job loss. But $100,000, that covers multiple simultaneous disasters and still has money left over working for you in the background. That's not just protection, that's a completely different relationship with money, risk, and the future. Let's talk about what actually happens to your psychology the moment you cross 6 figures in savings. The first thing that changes, and this one surprises people, is your relationship with time. When you have nothing saved, every financial decision is made under pressure. You don't have the luxury of waiting for the right opportunity. You take the first job offer because you need it right now. You renew the lease without negotiating because you can't afford the risk of being in between apartments for even 2 weeks. You accept the bad deal because you don't have the breathing room to walk away and find a better one. But when you have $100,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account, and by the way, at today's rates that money is generating somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 a year just by existing, suddenly time works for you instead of against you. You can wait out a bad job market. You can negotiate from a position of genuine strength. You can say no to things that don't serve you. And that ability to say no might be the single most financially powerful skill a person can develop. There's also something that happens to your decision-making that most financial videos completely skip over. You stop making choices from a place of scarcity. Imagine you're sitting at your desk at work one ordinary Thursday morning, and your manager walks in with that tone. You know the one. The conversation doesn't go the way you hoped. When you have zero savings, your only thought is, I cannot lose this job. So you absorb it. You smile and nod. You go back to your desk, stare at your screen, and say nothing. But when you have $100,000 saved, you have real options. You're not cornered. And here's the wild part. You probably still won't quit. But knowing that you could changes everything about how you carry yourself in that room. The confidence isn't arrogance. It's the quiet, grounded kind. The kind that comes from knowing there's a foundation underneath you, no matter what happens next. And the crazy part is, that confidence bleeds into everything. Into salary negotiations, into how you talk to service providers, into whether you bother to read the fine print before signing something. People with real financial reserves don't get taken advantage of nearly as often because desperation is readable. When you're desperate, people can sense it. When you're not, when you genuinely don't need to say yes, that energy transforms every negotiation, every conversation, every opportunity you encounter. Now let's talk math, because this is where it gets both brutal and genuinely exciting. The average American household has less than $5,000 in liquid savings. Meanwhile, the average unexpected emergency costs around $3,000. That means most American families are one moderately sized disaster away from debt. Now contrast that with a $100,000 position. At 4% in a high-yield savings account, which many banks are currently offering, you're earning $4,000 a year without doing a single additional thing. That's over $330 per month in passive income, while you sleep, while you're commuting, while you're watching this video. That's not just a financial cushion. That's a complete restructuring of your relationship with money itself. Let's add this up in real terms. At $100,000 saved and invested conservatively, you're looking at $4,000 per year in returns, depending on where it's parked. Over 10 years, without adding another dollar, that becomes $148,000 at 5%, or $179,000 at 6%. The money is working while you work. Two income streams. That's the shift people don't see coming until they're living it. Here's something that might surprise you. A lot of people think the jump from $0 to $10,000 is the hardest part of this journey, and it is genuinely hard. But there's actually, let me put it this way, the jump from $10,000 to $100,000 is where most people stall out completely. Not because they stop caring, not because they don't want it, but because the math feels impossible when you're staring at $90,000 more to go on a regular salary. And here's the thing, most people miss. They're thinking about it linearly. They imagine saving $500 a month and doing the division and feeling defeated. But wealth doesn't build linearly. It builds like a boulder, being pushed uphill. Slow at first, grinding. Every $1,000 feels like a fight against gravity. But somewhere around the $40,000 mark, something shifts. You stop working quite so hard to save and start letting the money itself do some of the heavy lifting. Interest compounds, investments grow, a side hustle turns into real secondary income. The boulder reaches the crest of the hill and then it starts rolling on its own. That's not a metaphor, that's compound interest with momentum behind it. Think about the last time you looked at your savings account and felt genuinely proud of what you saw. Now imagine that number has 6 digits. Not because you won anything, not because something lucky happened, but because you stayed the course long enough for the math to start working in your favor. That feeling, that specific combination of security and possibility, is what $100,000 actually buys you, and no subscription service on earth comes close. Now let's talk about what $100,000 covers in practical terms, because numbers without context are just noise. First, job loss. The average American spends roughly $3,500 per month on basic living expenses including rent, food, utilities, and transportation. $100,000 gives you approximately 28 months of full financial runway before you'd need to touch an emergency backup. 28 months. That's not surviving a layoff, that's thriving through one. You could take 6 months off, travel for 2, launch a business, get certifications, reposition your entire career, and still have significant money remaining. Second, medical emergencies. The average out-of-pocket maximum for employer-sponsored insurance sits around $4,500. Even a serious health event, hospitalization, surgery, extended recovery, falls within what $100,000 can handle without destroying your financial life. You're not choosing between treatment and making rent. Third, real estate. A $100,000 position means a legitimate down payment on a rental property in most American markets. That's not spending your savings, that's deploying it into an asset that generates returns. Fourth, opportunity. When a real estate deal emerges, when a business needs a modest investment, when someone you trust is launching something and needs $15,000 to get off the ground, the person with $100,000 can participate. Not recklessly, deliberately. The person with nothing can only watch. Alright, real talk. What's your actual savings number right now? Not the one you're working toward. Your real current balance. Drop it in the comments. No judgment. Zero shame. I'm genuinely curious where people are starting from. Here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the section most personal finance videos skip entirely, because it doesn't fit in a neat bullet point. The emotional experience of having $100,000 isn't one single moment. It's a series of them that compound over time, The first time you check your balance and it reads 6 figures, there's a physical reaction. Your shoulders drop about 2 inches. You take a breath differently. The second time you check, you feel it again but differently, like it's becoming your new normal instead of a fluke. By the third time, something fundamental has changed in how you see yourself. You start thinking differently about what's actually possible. Not in a dramatic, quit your job and move to Bali way. In a quiet, structural way. You start wondering about rental property cash flow, about maxing your Roth IRA, about whether index funds or individual stocks make more sense for the next phase. You start thinking in decades instead of weeks. It feels like, and I've heard this from people who've crossed this line, it feels like one day you're playing defense with your money, and then almost without noticing you're playing offense. And that shift right there is worth more than the $100,000 itself. Because once you're playing offense, you almost never go back. Now I want to address something head-on, because the comments on videos like this one always bring it up. Some people say $100,000 sounds impossible from where I'm standing. And I hear that, genuinely. But let me push back, honestly and without judgment. Most people who feel like $100,000 is unreachable are spending between $15,000 per year on things that leave no lasting value. And I'm not talking about groceries or rent. I'm talking about invisible spending. The streaming subscriptions plural, you forgot you signed up for. The car payment on a vehicle that costs $600 a month when a paid-off used car would have gotten you to the same office. The dining out budget that quietly doubles every year without a single conscious decision. The impulse purchases that feel small individually but stack into thousands annually. Research consistently shows the average American spends over $18,000 per year on discretionary items, dining, entertainment, clothing, convenience. If you redirected even 1/3 of that, $6,000 per year, you'd reach $100,000 in roughly 16 years from zero, with zero investment return. Put that same $6,000 into a broad market index fund, averaging 7% annually, and you're looking at hitting $100,000 in under 12 years. Starting from absolute zero. Here's the kicker. Most people burn those same 12 years spending that money on things they genuinely cannot remember buying. Now you might be thinking, okay, but what about people who are stretched thin through no fault of their own? Single parents, people supporting extended family, people carrying medical debt or student loans that arrived before they understood what they were signing. And I get it. I'm not here to dismiss any of that. But here's what I will say. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is direction. Even if your version of the path to $100,000 takes 20 years, the person who stays on that path ends up in a fundamentally different place than the person who decides it's impossible and never begins. $200 a month for 20 years at 7% becomes over $104,000. That's not a fantasy, that's a spreadsheet. Let's talk about something that personal finance culture almost never addresses directly. The social pressure to unsave. And I mean this in the most literal sense possible. The closer you get to real financial stability, the louder the external forces become. Friends who want you to split a vacation that doesn't fit your budget. Family members who assume that because you have money saved, you can spare some, and who take it personally when you can't. A broader culture that has fully romanticized spending and turned saving into something that seems boring, antisocial, or even selfish. Think about it this way. Nobody in your life makes money when you say no. The entire system, advertising, retail, credit products, social media, is optimized to separate you from your savings. And it works precisely because it's invisible. You don't feel it happening in real time. You just look up one day and wonder where the last paycheck went. The person who sees this mechanism clearly has a massive, permanent advantage over everyone who doesn't. Here's something wild about who actually profits when you don't save. The credit card company earns 24% APR on your balance. The auto dealer earns a financing spread on your car payment. The subscription service earns your monthly fee while you forget it exists. The restaurant earns your convenience dollar at 300% markup over cooking at home. Nobody in that chain makes money when you build a $100,000 savings account. Nobody. And understanding that isn't cynical, it's clarifying. Let me give you permission to do something most people are quietly afraid to do. You can tell people you don't want to spend money on that. You can decline the group trip. You can drive the car that runs instead of the car that impresses. You can bring your lunch 4 days a week. You can wait 6 months before buying the thing you want. You can keep your lifestyle completely flat while your income grows. And you can watch your savings climb towards 6 figures without apologizing to a single person for making that choice. Here's something interesting about human psychology that ties everything together. When you have zero savings, every dollar feels precious, but you spend them anyway, because what's the point of being careful with something that's already almost gone? It's a defeated mindset. You stop tracking expenses because the numbers are depressing. You avoid checking your bank account the way some people avoid stepping on a scale. But when you cross meaningful milestones, $10,000, then $50,000, each one builds something beyond the number itself. It builds identity. You start genuinely thinking of yourself as someone who manages money well, as someone who has savings. And that identity shift changes every financial decision you make from that point forward. You become more likely to negotiate your salary, more likely to ask questions before signing anything, more likely to pause before a purchase and ask, does this actually make sense for where I'm trying to go? Because now finally, you have something real to protect, and that changes the entire game. Let's get practical for a second, because strategy without execution is just entertainment. The fastest path to $100,000 isn't finding a secret investment. It's two things happening simultaneously, reducing what leaks out and increasing what comes in. On the reduction side, audit every recurring charge in your bank account right now. Seriously, this week, most people find $150 to $300 per month in subscriptions and memberships they forgot existed. Cancel half of them, and you've found $100 extra per month without changing a single spending habit. On the income side, every raise, every bonus, every tax refund, before lifestyle inflation has a chance to absorb it, redirect the increase directly into savings. This one rule alone, keeping your lifestyle flat when your income grows, is responsible for more six-figure savings accounts than any investment strategy ever invented. And here's the part nobody talks about. Once you hit $100,000, the psychological resistance to saving actually decreases. Most people assume that saving gets harder the longer you do it. But the opposite is true. Once the identity is established, once the habits are automatic, once you've watched compound interest actually do something visible, saving becomes genuinely easier than spending used to be. The boulder is rolling, and all you have to do is stay out of its way. The path to $100,000 looks different for everyone sitting here. Some people get there by 28. Some get there at 46, after raising kids and navigating everything life throws without a manual. Some people get there after being in debt, rebuilding from zero, starting over after a divorce, or a job loss, or a medical crisis that took everything. Every single version of that journey is valid. Every version is a win. Because the number matters less than what it represents. The proof that you stayed the course long enough for the math to do its job. The boulder doesn't care how long it took to reach the top of the hill. Once it starts rolling, it doesn't stop. If this changed how you think about what's actually possible with your savings, pass it along to someone who needs to hear it.